Hi, I'm Tucker Balch, and this is the second video of the second module in Computational Investing, Part 1. When we left off last time, we were wondering how investors might assess a hedge fund. How do they decide which ones to invest in? And the topic of this video is quantitative metrics for measuring funds. Here's an example of a fund and a benchmark. For many funds, we need a benchmark, and in this case, our benchmark is the Dow Jones, and we're looking from 2009 to midpoint of 2012. The blue line here represents the fund that we're comparing against the benchmark. And we'll get into the details of the individual metrics, but just a couple things to look at before we dive in there. First of all, they both ended up, from the beginning to the end, they both ended up gaining about the same total amount. But if you notice, our benchmark, the Dow Jones, was quite volatile, whereas the fund itself went up somewhat smoothly. However, there were definitely times when, as the fund was going up smoothly, it wasn't making as much return as the market itself. So we'll look at how to compare the two and measure those differences in a quantitative way. Okay, these are the most common metrics. You've probably seen a lot of them before, and in fact the one people focus on a lot is annual return. How much is my money making each year? You hear numbers like 10%. CD these days is about 3%. Those are always talking about annual, how much in a year. And that's a very important metric, but not the only one. And in fact, people who are looking at investing in hedge funds are very concerned about risk. Now, what does risk mean? There are lots of different measures for risk and definitions of risk, but the key metric that's used over and over and over again in the financial world is standard deviation of return. What that really means is volatility. How volatile is the fund? How volatile is the stock? That versus this, of course, you want lower volatility over higher volatility. Another measure of risk is drawdown. That means when the portfolio went down, how much? And it's always measured in a proportion of the overall fund size. For instance, you see here, during this time period, the market went down substantially, whereas the fund we're looking at didn't go down quite as much. So you want, obviously, lower drawdown is better. Now, a very important metric, one that